Time for another fragrance review. I'm gonna do a few to keep my channel active. I almost feel like I feel like since I've been doing more of the video game stuff, the fragrance reviews are getting even less views, so it kind of sucks. But it's like almost maybe should I do fragrance reviews like just one at a time to start getting back in the rhythm of doing fragrance reviews because they just get even less views than they used to. But I don't know. What are you gonna do? Can't have it both ways, I guess. Video game people don't care about fragrances. Anyway, let's do a few today. I'm gonna do Burberry's London because I've never done that before actually. I'm gonna do Art of Shaving's Bourbon Amber, House of Matriarchs, Sacre tabac sucre, however you say it, and oh fuck, oh Dolce& and Gabbana the one gray. I'll do that too, I guess. Anyway, first one I'm gonna do Burberry's London. I've never done this before. Burberry's London, in my opinion, is, and many people' opinion, they say it's kind of like the fall in a bottle fragrance, right? And I think Burberry London is one of those fragrances that is, it's one of the best fragrances that you probably don't actually wear. I feel like it's one of those fragrances that lots of people talk about, but there just never feels like anyone is actually wants to wear it. It's like kind of like it's like the stepchild that is still just as good as your real child, but it's still your stepchild, so you gotta like put your real son ahead of him or something. I don't know how to explain it. I think it's even for me, it's one of those fragrances I don't actually own it. I've only ever had little bits of it. But I mean, if I had a high disposable income, I probably would own it. You know what I mean? It just is. It's definitely a fragrance that's kind of like a vibe. It's just a fragrance I've never felt like totally owning for some reason, even though I like whenever I wear it. I'm sure if I could go back in time, maybe if I wouldn't have bought a big bottle of so and so fragrance, I would have bought a small bottle of this and a small bottle of Burberry's London. I just feel like so many times you just get in the situation like, well, I could wear this or everything it does. And the weird thing, okay, you're like Clayton, you're all over the place. Everything I feel like that it does another fragrance, I might want to just wear that instead. Maybe it does it better. But at the same time, Burberry London, I do think it's unique. It doesn't necessarily specifically like smell like anything. I do think, again, if we're going with a fall in a bottle, imagine if something like, and I have seen some people say this as well, that it kind of smells like some of the John Varvatos fragrances. And I do agree. Like, it smells a little bit like the Varvatos and the original and the vintage a little bit. You can see the same sort of I don't think they were made by the same people, but if John Varvatos was trying to make the fall in a bottle fragrance like people call Burberry's London, you could see that this could have happened, right? Anyway, what do I think it smells like? I would imagine, I guess to visualize, I think it smells something like imagine you are searching for a Christmas tree, but it's too early to be searching for a Christmas tree, right? It's like fall, right? And you got these kind of like orange and red and brownish kind of leaves falling all around you and maybe you're searching for and like the sky too, it's like a sunset, auburn kind of color, right? All these leaves are passing you by and the leaves smell kind of sweet a little bit and there's a little bit of cinnamon in the air and there's a little bit of like a tobacco kind of vibe in there, maybe a little bit of like potpourri or whatever, right? And this kind of like warm kind of like aura is kind of like leading you on your search through this kind of forest while the sun is setting and you have all these again kind of like fall and autumn colors and you're looking for this green Christmas tree, but the Christmas tree doesn't actually exist. It's just kind of a vibe. You're just kind of going for it. Just like kind of like this smell. I can't totally pinpoint it at one specific thing. It does remind me of something from when I was younger that I can't exactly pinpoint, but it's kind of like that. It doesn't remind me of anything specifically like fall, but it does kind of remind me of fall. It's kind of weird, right? So I agree with people when they say that for sure. I will say the tobacco in this, a lot of times when you think of like a cherry tobacco, the specific cherry tobacco in this, the cherry in this, right when it starts off, it's a good tasting cherry cough drop. Again, I know I'm kind of anal, about different kinds of cherries because you know cherry starburst is different than a cherry cough syrup. It's different than a cherry sardine. You know what I mean? There's lots of different kinds of cherry smell. This is like one of those good cherry cough drops, right? Like a good tasting one. And there's a bit of that kind of like sweetness and syrupiness that you almost get like in some of the John Barbados fragrances actually as well. Almost kind of like a plum almost kind of feeling. And that doesn't last very long though. And then after that dries down, like which happens pretty quickly, the cherry becomes almost kind of like a cherry, kind of like powdery sort of feeling, right? And unfortunately for me though, this fragrance does sometimes get a little balmy and a little pasty sometimes when I smell it, which I'm not a big fan of when fragrances get pasty or jammy smelling. And there's a pinch of that. But in general, I know, again, I think this is actually one of the best fragrances that I actually don't own. So, I mean, I definitely, I feel like people talk about it so much and it's cheap. So maybe people don't think it's good, even though people hype up. It's like a very fine. It's that weird gray area. Like I feel like everyone in the fragrance community probably knows what it is, but most people probably don't wear it very often. And I, it's strange, right? It's that weird ground, but I do think it's a great fragrance, right? Not something I own because there's a little bit of things that kind of bother me about it, but considering how much it is, you know what I mean? I think it's a great cheapie. Next one I'm gonna do Dolce and Banana. I don't Dolce and Gabbana, the one gray. Again, Dolce and Gabbana. Dolce and Gabbana, the one gray. No, Dolce and Gabbana, the original one is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. Like I said before, I tend to think the EDT almost smells a little bit better than the EDP sometimes, but maybe that's just me. This one, honestly, this one was nothing to me. Kind of just smells like imagine you have Dolce and Gabbana the one, and you were tasked with making a bar of soap out of it, and you make this bar of soap, and it just takes away all it adds this kind of green freshness to it. And I saw someone posted a review on Fragrantica, and they said it has a little bit of a Pepsi fizz to it. And I can totally see that at the beginning. Actually, there is a bit. Imagine if, like, when you're washing your hands with this Dolce and Gabbana, the one soap that is like green and fresh smelling, that there's a little bit of like sparkle and fizz from almost like a Pepsi kind of smell right at the beginning, right? There's some like vetiver in it too. It's more green. You know what I mean? And it's just a more fresh, kind of green version of Dolce and Gabbana the one, and you can still smell a little bit of that Dolce and Gabbana the one DNA at the end of it. But the problem is that DNA, all that yumminess is the best part of that fragrance. So toning it down just kind of ruins it, right? I mean, I guess people might be, hey, do you want a more fresh version of Dolce and Gabbana, the one that smells soapy, that you can still smell a little bit of the beginning of that you can still smell a little bit of the DNA in the background. Maybe your argument is, oh, you can wear this in a little bit warmer weather, but I mean, I just think why? For me personally, why? I mean, it's not like Dolce and Gabbana, the one is like a powerhouse. It's not like it's like so extreme that it's going to be choking someone out in the summer, really. You know what I mean? And you can only get so hot in the first place. Like, not when I talk about like climates and seasons of fragrances, you can only get so hot where almost any fragrance is going to smell bad anyway, right? It doesn't even matter if you're wearing fucking Millesime Imperial, right? If it's super hot outside and you're sweating, no one wants to be if you're sweating, almost nothing is going to smell good, right? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, is Dolce and Gabbana the one in the first place that much of a powerhouse? Like, are you really going for that specific degree and temperature where you're not quite sweating, but it's still too hot to wear Dolce and Gabbana the one? Like, that's a very specific range of degrees, I think. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, what is the purpose of this, right? I just, if you like it, you like it. Not really my thing. I'm giving it a pass. Next one I'm gonna do House of Matriarchs Sacred Tabac. I've said before I do really like the Sacred Tabac Cacao Teride. I've given a review on that before. I think that one smells awesome. And I think this one smells pretty good too. Supposedly it's supposed to smell like a, God, it was supposed to, what did they say it's supposed to exactly smell like? What did they say this one was? A Starbuzz double apple hookah. Now, I'm going to be honest, I have never smelled that specific flavor, Starbuzz double apple, whatever. I've never smelled that specific flavor. So I can't tell you if this exactly smells like that. But what I can tell you is that it smells pretty good. And when you think of like natural perfumes, it's weird. Like I was surprised at just how crisp and there's like a bit of juiciness to this. There's like a cherry, almost kind of like a there's like a bit of a crisp, juicy cherry apple smell to this. And the apple is just a little bit of like maybe you bite into it. Like when you bite into it, there's a bit of that crisp cherry apple kind of hookah, whatever kind of smell, I guess, or a Star Buzz double apple. I've never smelled that exact one, right? But you bite into that apple, and when you get into the crust, there's just a bit of that caramel or whatever in it, right? And caramel apple doesn't necessarily do anything for me, but I was impressed by the cherry apple kind of. Again, there's a bit of a crispness and a juiciness to it, which I was surprised because, you think natural perfumes. I don't know, for some reason, it was surprising to me to smell this. Um, it is a bit scratchy though. Um, like I don't know if the notes actually listed anything woody wise or something, but I do get a bit of that kind of like a bit of a scratchy wood kind of feeling. It could be another mix of the notes. I'm not a note monster, you know what I mean? But there is a bit of a scratchiness to this. But in general, I thought this was pretty good. You know what I mean? It's one of those fragrances. If I was rich, I probably wouldn't mind owning it or getting a little small thing of it. I Performance was pretty good too. Performance isn't anything bad. Considering, God, I've said like that. And I think some people took that the wrong way. Maybe too much of like the fanboys. Like I said, that cacao to read, not cacao to read, Coco Blanc, right? You know what I mean? I think that one smells fine. I just thought that was kind of a misleading. Some people say it's like the most gourmand, best gourmand fragrance ever, and I think it's more of a woody kind of fragrance with the gourmand in the background. But it smells fine, but the performance is just not very good for the money, I don't think. But this one performance was pretty fine, right? I would still like to smell the Woo fragrance. I think Woo is the other tobacco fragrance from this house that I've never smelled, but I was pretty impressed with this one. It's I can't justify the price with my disposable income for fragrances, but I thought it smelled good. I was pretty impressed by it. I mean, it's almost one of those things. It's kind of up my alley a little bit. Besides the scratchiness that kind of like bothers me a little bit, but I just have so many tobacco kind of fragrances. It's just really hard to justify with my disposable income. But I think it's worth trying out. I was impressed by it. You know what I mean? I think definitely that I've smelled from the house. Again, there's still a handful that I haven't smelled before, but the Cacao Terreed is my favorite by far. Like that's a really great one. I recommend that one. Then got it could be if Coco Blanc actually performed it all. This or Coco Blanc. You know what I mean? Smell all right. And I think the black is it black? Is it Blackbird or Black Number One? I think I forgot if they switched the name. Not really my kind of fragrance, but I think that is a good fragrance, objectively speaking. You know what I mean? I think what it does really well. And God, there's an amber one from them that smells all right, but you know what I mean? I think those are the best five that I've actually smelled from the house. Still a few I have to smell eventually, but super fucking expensive, you know what I mean? And I'm pretty far along my fragrance journey to keep paying for all these fucking samples all the time. You know what I mean? And finally, I'm gonna do Art of Shaving Amber Bourbon. I've actually had this fragrance for a while, and I got a shitload of it. Actually, funny story, dude. Um, about a year ago, and actually, I'm kind of normally I think being nice is actually a big human flaw. Being nice is usually a sign of weakness if it doesn't benefit you at all, for sure, in my opinion. But I was at the mall, and dude came up to me just because I'm I try to like randomly talk to people and friendly. He's like, "Oh, hey, Clayton." He's like, "Hey, I actually work at Art of Shaving, dude." And he's like, the writing's on the wall. He's like, "Dude, we're gonna be closing." And he's like, "And I've heard you're into fragrances before." He's like, "So, dude, instead of us just sending all this stuff back, come into the store right now. We'll give you as many bags as you want. Take everything for free. No fucking joke, dude, right?" And he just starts handing me bags. I'm like, "Dude, I can't take all this." And he's like, "No, Clayton." He's like, "Dude, we're going to be closing the store. I can already tell it's not going to go good. And, it's just more work for us to send back to them. You know what I mean? So take all of this shit, like, please, so we don't have to go sort through it all." And I only took one bag because I felt bad, but he tried to give me like bags and bags of stuff, dude. So anyway, I got a ton of free shit from them, dude. And actually, I think I've had this for a while. I think the Amber Bourbon one, and I haven't seen it talked about in the fragrance community too much, is a good one, right? All the fragrances in general that I've smelled from them, they're not really my kind of thing. I mean, they smell fine, but not really my kind of vibe. And I think they are kind of expensive for what they are when you're into the fragrance kind of game. But I guess they have their own kind of vibe. Um, but the Amber Bourbon one is actually pretty good, right? It's kind of like one of those things that, how would I describe how this smells? Well, first of all, again, I'm not a note monster, but whenever I smell this, it instantly reminds me of like Herod because of that citral oil, whatever mix it is. It's got that same kind of smell to it, that fresh kind of mix to it, whatever it is. Again, I just look at the notes and I'm like, this mix of citral oil, whatever, it reminds me of fucking Herod, dude. So imagine it's supposed to smell like bourbon amber distilled, whatever kind of nonsense. The dude was driving in his Lamborghini while getting a blowjob. The wind was blowing in his hair, and amber bourbon came out. Whatever the fuck, I don't know. However the fuck they're trying to describe how it smells. I would almost say so. Imagine, God, I don't know. If you like the kind of fragrances I like, so imagine you like, say, like Dolce and Gabbana the One, those kind of fragrances, right? So imagine some dude is being tasked with making a Dolce and Gabbana the One kind of like bourbon kind of mix, right? And again, they use this kind of analogy so much like a herb, like a cask, what a casket is. That what the fuck a casket? What the fuck? It's late. It's almost, what is it? Not quite 1 a.m. Um, and imagine like, so you're trying to make a fragrance kind of like something I like, say like the Dolce and Gabbana the One, right? But it's not as going to be as fruity as Dolce and Gabbana the One. It's not going to have that same kind of tobacco, but there's still kind of that kind of yummy kind of dry down. You know what I mean? So whatever. So imagine you got this sandalwood kind of fucking like cask, whatever, right? And this kind of like fresh green citral kind of oil, whatever mix is kind of like leaning you in, bringing you closer to this cask made of sandalwood, right? And they made this like bourbon mix of Dolce and Gabbana the One or whatever kind of fragrances that I tend to like. You know what I mean? Those kind of mixes, but not as fruity. And the cask now has some of the bourbon has kind of like booze has kind of leaked out of the cask, and the sandalwood cask now has a orange golden amber candy crust on it, right? Because there's kind of like an orange gold. Just imagine the cask is like that. So some of it's leaked out, and this green, fresh sort of citral oil mix has brought you in closer to this bourbon cask, and the bourbon is like come out of the cask, and now it's an orange golden crust, candy crust on this sandalwood cask. Whatever the fuck, dude, right? I guess something like that. I mean, I think it smells pretty good. I will say there is a bit of an old funk to it. There is a bit of an old earth funk to it, bourbon, alcohol kind of funk to it. It never is funky, but it is sometimes when I smell it a little bit of a funk. So never funky, but there is a bit of an older funk to it sometimes. Um, I think this one would actually be amazing if the yumminess of it was just toned up just a smidge, because sometimes when I wear it, and every time you wear a fragrance, sometimes you get a little bit different out of it. It might be the air around you, might be your skin. Sometimes you pick up on different notes, right? Like when this fragrance is at its most kind of like yummy and amber is all coming out, you know, the really kind of yummy vanilla, those kind of things, you know, that kind of yummy mix, it's at its best. But sometimes it doesn't always quite get that kind of, it doesn't always get to that level. Like if you upped the yumminess of this just a smidge, I think this would be awesome, right? But unfortunately, when I wear it, it's not always quite that yummy. But when it is, it's pretty awesome, I think, right? But in general, though, it's kind of just become a dumb reach for me when I'm kind of bored, right? But I do think it's good. I think it's worth checking out if you can get a deal on it. Um, but it's a nice fragrance. Again, there's a little bit of an older funk to it sometimes, but again, your nose always picks up something different. Performance was fine. I've tried it out a few times in front of girls. You know, they thought it smelled fine, but nothing. Again, not something I've worn a lot, so I can't really tell you super good on compliments. But I've never had anyone tell me they hate it that I can recall. But again, I haven't worn it too much, but yeah. Whatever. I think it's the best smelling one from them. If you like the kind of fragrances I like, if I described it, makes it sound alright to you. Definitely try it out. Keeping my channel active fragrance runs. I don't know if I should just do single reviews. Maybe that'd be better instead of rambling about multiple fragrances at one time. But I don't know, dude. Anyway, keeping my channel active fragrance wise. The end.